Hey, you guys, we are coming to you today, and we have a very interesting topic, but you got to stay tuned to figure out what the topic is. Because have you ever played the game telephone? Like when you were a kid, and so like the first person starts out and they say something to the next person, and then it goes all the way around the circle, and then by the time it gets back to the beginning of the circle, it sounds nothing like what the original topic was. Well, sometimes when you hear things in the news or via hearsay from all kinds of people, sometimes it gets mistranslated. So today we are going to clarify and help you guys understand about the NAR settlement.
Which, the funny part about this idea of the game of telephone is we have had so many questions from just people in the community this week. And as an example, one person said, so I hear that, you know, at the maximum, a realtor can only charge 1%. There's a cap. No, like there's nowhere near the reality, nowhere near the truth. So.
Back to the game of telephone.
That's right. That's right. I mean, there's been so many funny ideas, and to be quite honest, I think most people are probably not in the habit of going to, a search engine to find the specific details of a legal court case, right?
Well, because they're usually long and boring, and there's so many definitions, and it's hard legalese that you have to understand.
That's right. So we filter the realities through different news sources, et cetera. So our goal today is really just to talk about the NAR settlement and how it has changed the real estate transactions, residential transactions in the U.S. today.
Right.
As a matter of fact, this started as of the date of this recording 24 hours ago. Mm-hmm. And so here we go. That's the plan for today, right?
Right.
So the whole idea behind the NAR settlement truly is just full disclosure, which is something that honestly Brandy and I have always done if you've ever worked with us as your buyer agents or as your listing agents. And so now, in short, the buyer has to sign two forms. One is the buyer agency agreement. The other is the real estate disclosure, agency disclosure. We call that in the state of Alabama RECAD. And again, quite honestly, that's really not a new requirement. And so RECAD just explains different types of agency, single agency, sub-agency, transaction broker, etc. So it just defines that. But the buyer agency agreement, again, is not new. We have used this for years.
Right.
And so, but some realtors chose not to. Let's talk about what that is. So what the buyer agency agreement states is, number one, what is the scope of services that you are hiring a realtor to do? What type of home are you looking for? What location are you desiring? And then the next thing is it describes, what the scope of the timeline or the time frame. So you can hire a buyer agency just to look at one property, and once that showing is finished, your agency is dissolved. It is an agreement between you and the agent, and it can be with whatever scope you choose. Again, you're the consumer, and all these laws are about protecting the consumer. So the agency agreement describes what's the scope of services, what timeline, whether it's the one property or whether it's for the next 12 months. In general, the buyer agency is completed once you buy the property that you hired the agent to find and help with the transaction. But it also describes the compensation. So how's the agent going to be compensated is described on there. And then finally, because it is, if you hire this agent as a buyer's agent, there is an idea of confidentiality.
Right.
So in other words, as you are working with the agent from your financial standpoint, what's the most you would pay for a property? What are your credit qualifications? What are your financing opportunities? All those things are confidential between you and that agent.
Well, I think another thing, too, to think about is a lot of times what we've seen in the past is people will say, well, I'll just go to the listing agent. They can open the door and I'll get a better deal. But as you were talking about with confidentiality, remember when you do that, the listing agent is already legally bound to the seller, with fiduciary responsibilities.
That's
So
right.
they are actually going to be looking out for the best interest of the seller, not you as the buyer.
That's right. And we've done another video. We probably will do another one again to update it on why it's important
Right.
in Alabama to have a buyer's agent. But, think about this. If you don't choose to hire a realtor and to go directly to the listing agent, as Brandy said, that listing agent already has a fiduciary responsibility to the seller. And in Alabama is a buyer beware state. So there's not necessarily any obligation for that agent to help you understand which inspections are going to be
Right.
appropriate and needed, and how to get those, and how to get quality inspectors, etc. So that piece of the buyer agency is super important.
Right.
In that when you hire the agent, you are hiring them for them to be your advocate through this. So
Yes.
it's much more than about
Just opening a door.
finding a property,
Right.
opening a door. It's much more about being your consultant, your advocate as you go through the transaction. Now, this opens up one other opportunity here in Alabama for something called a transaction broker.
Right.
So again, for a buyer who says, I'll just go directly to the agent who is representing the seller. And so that agent can show a house to a buyer, because the reason for that is not because they're serving that buyer, but because by showing the property of the house they have listed, they are actually serving the
Right.
seller. And so this does happen. It's happened to us. It's happened to a lot of realtors. Instead of doing dual agency, what that realtor might choose to do for you, the buyer, is be a transaction broker.
Right.
Now, a transaction broker, you say, oh my gosh, what is that? Well, a transaction broker, just to put it in terms that will be easily remembered, is really just a paper filler outer.
Right.
You have to, as the buyer, you have to tell that transaction broker, that realtor, exactly what you want in the contract. In other words, you have to drive that. They are merely just working the transaction from a paperwork standpoint, not in an advisory role,
Right.
not in a consulting role. And so you can't ask their opinion, you can't ask for the recommendation. You can
Right.
ask, but they shouldn't give it to you, right?
Right.
Because they're a transaction broker. So that's one other piece of this that's really important. And it goes back to why you should hire and use a buyer agent. So you, as a consumer, you can click on a website, be connected with a realtor. You can call up a realtor, whether you know them or not. If that realtor meets you at a house and shows you a house and does not present you with, number one, in Alabama, the real estate agency disclosure, or what we call RECAD, and number two, the buyer agency agreement or transaction broker agreement, but they show you the home according to the rules of the NAR settlement, they are actually breaking our professional standards.
Right.
And so that is the big piece, is that those items are no longer optional.
Right.
All right, so what does this really mean to you, the consumer? Well, number one, it means that the days of just, button clicking a realtor or calling up a friend to go show the house are pretty much over. It means that number two, you want to hire a realtor that is looking out for your best interest and is fully disclosing exactly how the process works. So now more than ever, having a realtor that you can trust is crucially important to buy and sell real estate here in Alabama. We hope this has been helpful to you, and we are always here to be your real estate resource of choice. We are Mike and Brandy Brown, Keller Williams Realty, Birmingham, Alabama.